The ultimatum. Richard Collins sat in his office, the expansive view of the Napa Valley vineyard stretching endlessly beyond the glass windows. The afternoon sun bathed the rolling hills in golden light, but Richard's thoughts were far from serene. His daughter, Emily, had crossed the line again. The reports from his private investigator lay open on his desk, detailing her latest rebellion. Emily was dating some lowlife, a no-good rebellious kid from Los Angeles who had a knack for causing trouble. Richard clenched his jaw. He had given her everything: wealth, education, and opportunities, and this was how she repaid him. He had tried reasoning with her, but Emily had always been headstrong, pushing against every boundary he set. After her mother passed away, Richard took it upon himself to control every aspect of her life. He believed it was the only way to protect her, to keep her safe from the dangerous world beyond their lavish estate. But now his control seemed to be slipping away. This wasn't just about a boy anymore. It was about respect. Richard's thoughts darkened as he formulated a plan, one so severe it would force Emily to reconsider her choices. He picked up the phone and dialed a familiar number. "Jake, I need to speak with you," he said when the line connected. Jake, the family's gardener, was as reliable as the sunrise. He had worked on the Collins estate for years, tending to the vineyards and gardens with quiet diligence. He was a simple man, someone who never asked for more than his modest wages and the satisfaction of a job well done. And he was about to become a pawn in Richard's game. A few minutes later, Jake arrived at the office. He knocked on the doorframe before stepping in, removing his cap, as he always did out of respect. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Collins?" Jake asked, his tone polite but wary. Richard looked him over. Jake was in his early 30s, rugged from years of outdoor work, with a demeanor that radiated calm. He was everything that Emily despised: unambitious, humble, and without the slightest desire for a life of luxury. But that was exactly what made him perfect for Richard's plan. "Yes, Jake, I have a proposition for you," Richard began, leaning back in his leather chair. "It involves my daughter, Emily." Jake frowned, clearly confused. Emily. He knew Emily, of course. Everyone on the estate did. She was beautiful and spirited, but she often displayed a reckless side that worried the staff. "Mr. Collins, Richard interrupted, his tone sharp. "I need you to understand something. Emily is making decisions that could ruin her future. She's involved with someone unworthy, someone who could lead her down a path of regret. I can't allow that to happen." Jake's frown deepened. He knew the girl had a wild streak, but she was still young. "What do you need me to do?" Richard leaned forward, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "I want you to pretend to be her fiancé." Jake's eyes widened in disbelief. "Pretend to be her fiancé? But Mr. Collins, that doesn't seem—" "Let me explain," Richard cut him off. "I'm going to force her into a situation where she realizes just how ridiculous her choices are. If she believes she is engaged to you, a humble gardener, it will shock her. It will make her see how absurd her current relationship is." Jake hesitated. "And what do I get out of this, sir?" Richard regarded him closely. "I will double your salary for the next year. You'll have a chance to save a young woman from making a grave mistake. And who knows, this could be a stepping stone to something greater for you." Jake contemplated this. He had always respected the Collins family, but getting involved in their personal affairs felt wrong. "But what if she hates me for it?" Richard waved his hand dismissively. "Hate is temporary. What I'm offering is a chance to help her, to guide her back to the right path. Besides, I'm the one who will take the heat. You'll simply be playing your part." Jake thought of Emily's bright smile, her laughter that echoed through the gardens, and how she was always so full of life despite the shadows of her past. It pained him to think that Richard would go to such lengths, but he also understood the desperation of a father trying to protect his daughter. "All right," Jake finally said, his voice steady. "I'll do it." Richard smiled, a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. "Excellent. We start tomorrow." The next morning, Emily was in her favorite spot by the pool, sunbathing with her friends, oblivious to the turmoil brewing beneath the surface of her father's plans. She was scrolling through her phone, laughter ringing out as her friends exchanged playful jabs about their summer romances. Little did she know, her world was about to be turned upside down. As Jake approached the house, he felt a mix of anxiety and determination. He had always kept to himself, focusing on his work and avoiding the chaos of the Collins family drama. But now, he was stepping into a role he never imagined he would take on, playing the part of a man who would challenge Emily's worldview. "Jake," Emily called out, spotting him as he walked through the garden. She flashed him a bright smile, the kind that made his heart flutter, even if he dared not show it. "What brings you out here?" "The flowers don't need watering yet." He hesitated, unsure of how to respond. "Just checking in, Miss Collins," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. She laughed. "You're always so formal. Call me Emily, please." "Emily," he corrected himself, feeling the weight of her gaze. I wanted to talk to you about something." "Oh, is it about the roses? I think they need more sun." "No," he said quickly. "It's about your father. He wanted me to tell you something." Emily's expression shifted, curiosity replacing her playful demeanor. "What did he say?" Jake took a deep breath. He wants you to consider your choices more carefully. He believes that you're not on the right path." Her brow furrowed. "What does that even mean?" "He's concerned about your relationship with, that guy from Los Angeles." "Jason," she scoffed. "What does he know about my life? He's just trying to control me." "I understand, but he's worried." "He cares about you, Emily," Jake pressed, trying to be gentle. "Cares? This is the same man who tried to dictate every aspect of my life since Mom died. He doesn't care about me. He cares about his reputation." Jake saw the anger boiling in her eyes, a fire that mirrored her father's fierce protection. "What if he's right?" he asked cautiously. "What if you're making a mistake?" Emily's laughter rang out, but there was a tinge of bitterness in it. "And what do you know about mistakes, Jake? You're just the gardener." His heart sank at her words. He had tried to remain neutral, to offer a perspective without taking sides, but her dismissal stung. "I know that sometimes people need to see the truth from a different angle," he replied, holding her gaze. Before she could respond, Richard's voice boomed from the house, cutting through the tension. "Emily, come here." Emily rolled her eyes. "This is great," she muttered. "Another lecture." As she walked away, Jake felt a mix of apprehension and determination. He had taken the first step into Richard's plan, and now it was only a matter of time before everything would change. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Richard summoned Jake to the study. "Are you ready?" he asked, the excitement palpable in his voice. "I am," Jake replied, trying to mask his anxiety. "Good. Tomorrow, we'll make the announcement," Richard said, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. It's time to shake Emily out of her delusions. As Jake left the study, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. He was stepping into a world of turmoil, one that would challenge not only Emily's perspective, but also his own beliefs about love, family, and the complexities of life in the shadow of wealth. The engagement. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the sun bathing the Collins estate in warm golden light. Jake stood at the edge of the garden, feeling the earth beneath his feet. It was a place of peace for him, a sanctuary where he could escape the complexities of life and focus on nurturing the plants he loved. Today, however, he felt a weight upon him, an obligation to play a role that felt foreign and uncomfortable. Richard had briefed him the previous day on the details of their plan. Jake would pose as Emily's fiancé, and the goal was to shock her into realizing the futility of her current relationship. "She'll never see it coming," Richard had said, a sinister smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Jake had agreed to the scheme, but as he stood there, The gravity of the situation pressed heavily upon him. He respected Emily and her spirit, but this felt like a betrayal. Taking a deep breath, Jake steeled himself for the day ahead. He gathered his thoughts and headed toward the main house. As he walked, he rehearsed his lines in his mind, trying to prepare for what was to come. The last thing he wanted was to hurt Emily, but Richard's authority loomed over him like a shadow. Emily was in the kitchen, chatting animatedly with her friends, laughter ringing out like music. She had no idea of the storm brewing just outside. "Hey guys, who wants to hit the beach later?" she asked, her enthusiasm infectious. Jake paused in the doorway, taking a moment to observe her. Emily was vibrant and full of life, a force of nature that demanded attention. Her blonde hair framed her face like a halo, and her laughter was a melody that could brighten even the darkest days. But it was her rebellious streak that worried him. The choices she made, the people she surrounded herself with. He understood Richard's intentions, but did he really have the right to interfere in her life? "Hey, Jake," Emily called out, her voice pulling him from his thoughts. "What's up?" "Morning, Emily," he replied, stepping inside. "I was hoping to have a word with you." Her expression turned curious, and her friends shot him amused glances. "Sure, what's going on?" "Is it about the garden?" she asked, raising an eyebrow playfully. Jake hesitated, feeling the weight of his role pressing down on him. "Actually, it's a bit more personal." The laughter in the room faded as her friends exchanged knowing looks. "Ooh, is Jake confessing his feelings?" one of them teased. Emily rolled her eyes, but there was a flicker of interest in her gaze. "All right, you have my attention. What's this about?" Jake took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "I wanted to tell you that, well, I have something important to share." He glanced around, making sure they were alone before continuing. "I've been thinking a lot about our lives and where we're heading, and I wanted to ask you if you would consider being my fiancé." The room fell silent. The playful atmosphere shattered like glass. Emily's eyes widened in disbelief, and Jake felt every heartbeat echo in the sudden quiet. The teasing glances from her friends shifted to shock. "Wait, what?" she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Her friends erupted in laughter, thinking it was a joke. "Good one, Jake. You had us there for a second," one of them said, elbowing Emily playfully. But Jake remained serious. "I'm not joking, Emily. I mean it." Emily's expression shifted from confusion to annoyance. "This isn't funny, Jake. You know I'm seeing someone." Jake pressed on, hoping to convey the weight of his intention. "I know, but the person you're seeing is not right for you. I think you need to see that." Her brows furrowed as anger flickered in her eyes. "How dare you? You have no idea what I need or what I want. This is ridiculous." She turned her back to him, dismissing him with a wave of her hand. "Just think about it," Jake said, trying to keep his tone steady. "I believe it could change your perspective." Emily faced him again, disbelief etched across her features. "You think pretending to be engaged to you will change my mind? This is absurd. You're my father's gardener. You don't know anything about my life." Her words stung, but Jake remained resolute. "That's exactly why it could work. Sometimes it takes a drastic measure to see the truth." "Drastic? You mean cruel?" Emily spat, her voice rising. "This is beneath you, Jake. You're better than this. I can't believe you would even suggest it." Just then, Richard entered the kitchen, sensing the tension. "What's all this commotion about?" he asked, looking between them. Emily crossed her arms defiantly. "Jake here wants to pretend to be my fiancé as some sort of twisted lesson." "Can you believe that?" Richard's eyes lit up with a mix of pride and mischief. "I think it's a brilliant idea. Maybe this will finally open your eyes, Emily." "Dad, you can't be serious," she exclaimed, her voice laced with disbelief. "You're both acting like I'm a child. I can make my own choices, and look where those choices are leading you," Richard replied, his tone unwavering. "Sometimes we need a little push to see things clearly." Jake's just trying to help. Emily felt her heart race, a mix of anger and betrayal surging through her. Help? You think humiliating me will help? I can't believe you'd stoop this low, Dad. Enough. Richard's voice boomed through the kitchen, silencing her protests. You will participate in this. You will see what it feels like to be engaged to someone who isn't what you think you want. It's time you faced reality. Jake felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He hadn't wanted to hurt Emily. He genuinely wanted to help her, but this wasn't the way. Emily, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to come off like this, he said softly. She shot him a withering glare. You don't get to apologize. This isn't your life. It's mine. Richard stepped forward, eyes fierce. This is for your own good. You're too young and too stubborn to see the consequences of your actions. You need to understand that there are choices we make that define our futures. Emily felt trapped, her world crumbling around her. You can't control me forever, Dad, she shouted, tears welling in her eyes. I will not go along with this. Then prepare for the consequences, Richard replied, his voice calm yet unyielding. You're grounded until you agree to this engagement, and I will ensure you cannot see that boy again. The ultimatum hung heavily in the air, and Jake felt a pang of sympathy for Emily. She was fighting for her freedom, and yet here he was, playing a part in her father's cruel game. But could he really help her? Fine, Emily said finally, her voice trembling with anger and betrayal. I'll play along, but don't think for a second that I'll actually marry you. Jake, you're making a huge mistake. Jake nodded, swallowing hard. I just want what's best for you, Emily. I promise. Richard smiled, satisfied with his daughter's reluctant compliance. Good. We'll announce the engagement tonight. This is your chance, Emily. Use it wisely. As they left the kitchen, Jake's heart felt heavy. He had agreed to Richard's plan, but he hadn't anticipated the emotional toll it would take. He had no idea how he could help Emily navigate this complicated situation, but he was determined to try. As the evening approached, Jake prepared himself for the announcement. He could only hope that this engagement would serve its purpose and guide Emily toward a better path. But as he looked in the mirror, he felt the weight of the deception settle on his shoulders. How could he wear the mask of a fiancé while knowing the truth of his feelings for her? That night, they gathered in the grand dining room, filled with the soft glow of candles and the enticing aroma of fine food. Emily entered the room, her heart pounding. She felt like a puppet on strings, forced into a role she never wanted. Her friends and family were present, the atmosphere charged with excitement. Richard stood at the head of the table, his demeanor triumphant. Everyone, I have an announcement to make, he declared, beaming with pride. My daughter, Emily, is engaged to Jake. Cheers erupted around the table as Emily's stomach churned with anxiety. She forced a smile, her heart heavy with the weight of her father's expectations. Jake caught her gaze, and for a fleeting moment, he saw the vulnerability beneath her bravado. He wanted to reach out, to reassure her that they would find a way out of this mess, but the moment passed too quickly. The evening unfolded in a blur of laughter and celebration, but all Emily could feel was the suffocating pressure of her father's control and the burden of pretending to be engaged to someone she barely knew. She had always wanted to forge her own path, to make her own choices, but now she was trapped in a gilded cage of expectations, and the key to her freedom felt further away than ever. As the night wore on, Jake realized that the game was only just beginning, and the stakes were higher than he had ever anticipated. But could he help Emily? The awakening. The days following the engagement announcement were a whirlwind of emotions for Emily. What was meant to be a light-hearted farce quickly spiraled into a suffocating reality. Richard had crafted a narrative so elaborate that it felt like an indelible stain on her life. Each day blurred into the next, filled with social gatherings and obligatory smiles. Emily's resentment toward her father festered, intertwining with a growing sense of hopelessness. As her friends embraced the news of her engagement, their excitement grated against her frayed nerves. They showered her with attention, planning elaborate celebrations and asking for details about her supposed future with Jake. To them, it was a fairy tale, a handsome gardener sweeping a beautiful heiress off her feet. But to Emily, it was a nightmare wrapped in a gilded package. One sunny afternoon, she found herself cornered in a cafe with her closest friend, Sarah, who had been relentless in her enthusiasm. "You're really going to love this, Em. Imagine the stories you'll tell. You're practically a princess." Sarah gushed, sipping her iced coffee as she scrolled through wedding inspiration on her phone. "Stop it, Sarah. You know this is ridiculous," Emily snapped, her voice laced with frustration. "I'm not really getting married." "Why not?" "It sounds romantic," Sarah insisted, eyes sparkling with excitement. "You're engaged to a gardener. That's like something out of a movie." "Yeah, a really bad one," Emily muttered, crossing her arms defiantly. "I can't believe you're supporting this. Come on, lighten up. You're just stressed. Think of it this way. It's a free pass to rebel against your dad. You don't have to actually go through with it." Emily took a deep breath, trying to rein in her anger. "This isn't rebellion. It's humiliation. I'm not even in love with Jake. He's just my dad's pawn in this sick game." As the conversation continued, she felt the walls closing in around her. Sarah's excitement felt like an additional weight, pressing down on her shoulders. It was one thing to play the part of an engaged woman. It was another to have her friends glamorize it. They had no idea of the complexities behind the facade. Later that evening, as Emily sat in her room, she pulled out her phone, staring at the endless string of congratulatory messages from acquaintances and family alike. Each one felt like a dagger, twisting deeper into her chest. The weight of her father's control felt oppressive, and she longed for the freedom she had once taken for granted. With a sudden burst of defiance, Emily decided she would confront her father. It was time to put an end to this charade. If he thought he could dictate her life, he was sorely mistaken. She would no longer be a puppet in his game. As she marched down the grand staircase, determination surged through her. She found Richard in his study, surrounded by reports and papers, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Dad, we need to talk," she said, her voice steady. Richard looked up, surprise etched on his face. "Emily, what is it?" "I'm busy." "This can't wait," she insisted, crossing her arms defiantly. "I'm not going to pretend to be engaged to Jake anymore." Richard leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting to one of irritation. "And why is that? You've already committed to this, and it's for your own good." "For my own good," Emily shot back, her voice rising. "You're manipulating me. You think forcing me into this engagement will open my eyes. It's humiliating." Richard's demeanor hardened. "You don't understand the gravity of your situation. Your choices have consequences, and I'm trying to protect you from making a terrible mistake. Jake is a good man. He can provide stability." "Stability?" Emily echoed, incredulous. "You think marrying a gardener will give me stability? It's absurd. I don't love him, and I refuse to live this lie." Richard's expression softened for a brief moment, but he quickly regained his composure. "You're being foolish. You need to see that this is about more than just you. It's about your future." Emily felt her heart race as she pressed on. "My future? You mean your vision for my future? You're treating me like I'm some kind of trophy, a pawn in your game of control. I'm not a child anymore, Dad. I deserve to make my own choices. Choices come with responsibilities." "Emily," Richard replied, his voice calm but firm. "You think you know what's best for you, but you're blinded by youthful arrogance. Maybe it's not arrogance. Maybe it's wanting to live my life on my own terms," she yelled, frustration boiling over. "You can't keep me locked away forever." Richard stood up, his eyes flashing with anger. "Enough. You will see this through, whether you like it or not. This is non-negotiable." The tension in the room crackled like electricity, and Emily felt her resolve strengthen. "I won't let you control me any longer," she declared, her voice steady. "I'm going to speak with Jake. I need to tell him the truth." Richard's expression shifted to one of disbelief. "What are you planning to say?" "I'm going to be honest with him about this whole ridiculous situation," she replied defiantly. "He deserves to know the truth." "Emily, I suggest you think this through. You're making a grave mistake," Richard warned, his voice dropping to a low growl. "Maybe it's a mistake you'll learn to regret," she shot back before turning on her heel and storming out of the room. Jake had been working in the gardens, lost in thought as he tended to the vibrant flowers. He'd felt the tension building between him and Emily, but he hadn't known how to bridge the gap. As he wiped the sweat from his brow, he heard footsteps approaching. Turning around, he was surprised to see Emily marching toward him, her face flushed with determination. "Jake, we need to talk," she said, her voice urgent. Jake stood up straight, sensing the intensity in her gaze. "What's wrong? You look upset." "Upset doesn't begin to cover it," she replied, her tone fierce. "I want to end this engagement. I can't keep pretending." Jake's heart sank. He had hoped that this arrangement would ultimately lead to something genuine, but deep down, he had known it was built on shaky ground. "I understand if you feel that way, Emily. I didn't want this to hurt you. I appreciate that, but I can't be part of this anymore," she insisted, her voice wavering slightly. "I'm not in love with you, and pretending to be engaged is tearing me apart." He felt a wave of sympathy wash over him. "I never meant to put you in this position. I thought it might give you a different perspective on your situation with him." "Right, my situation with him," she scoffed, running a hand through her hair in frustration. "This has gone too far, Jake. I need to take control of my own life." "I get it. I really do," Jake said softly. "But what do you want to do instead? It's not easy to just walk away from this." Emily took a deep breath, her heart racing. "I want to be free to make my own choices. I want to be with someone who respects me and understands me, not someone who is part of a scheme to teach me a lesson." Jake nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "Then let's end this engagement together. I'll talk to your father if that's what you want. I want you to be happy, even if it's not with me." "Thank you," she said, her voice softening. "I really appreciate your understanding. I just want my life back." As they stood in the garden, surrounded by blooming flowers, Jake realized that this was the turning point they both needed. They were no longer bound by the lies of Richard's plans. Emily's courage ignited something within him, a longing to support her in every way possible. "Let's go talk to him together," Jake said, determination settling into his chest. "We'll face this as a team." Emily smiled for the first time that day, a glimmer of hope breaking through the heaviness that had enveloped her. "Together," she agreed, and they set off toward the house. As they walked, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm golden glow around them. For the first time since the engagement announcement, Emily felt a flicker of excitement. Maybe confronting her father would be the first step toward reclaiming her life. Maybe she could break free from the suffocating expectations and finally be the person she had always wanted to be. Little did they know, Richard would not take their rebellion lightly. The confrontation was inevitable, and the consequences would echo through their lives in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. But as they reached the door to Richard's study, Emily felt a surge of courage. No matter what happened next, she was ready to reclaim her narrative. With her heart pounding in her chest, she knocked on the door, ready to face the man who had tried to control her fate. The moment had arrived for Emily to take back her life, and she was determined to do it on her own terms. The confrontation. As Emily stood before her father's study, a swirl of emotions churned within her. The soft light of the setting sun filtered through the grand windows, illuminating the ornate decor that felt more like a gilded cage than a home. The moment she had anticipated for days had arrived, yet she was unsure whether she felt more exhilarated or terrified. "Are you ready?" Jake asked softly, sensing her hesitation. He stood beside her, offering silent support. Despite the unusual circumstances that had brought them together, he had become a steady presence in her life, one that she never expected to need. "Ready or not, I can't back down now," she replied, taking a deep breath. "Let's do this." With a firm knock, Emily pushed the door open and stepped into the study. Richard was seated at his expansive mahogany desk, a half-finished glass of whiskey beside him, and papers strewn about in chaotic disarray. His brow furrowed as he looked up, surprise flickering across his features. "Emily." "Jake, what brings you here?" he asked, feigning nonchalance as he leaned back in his chair. "We need to talk, Dad," Emily stated, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. Richard's eyes narrowed, his expression shifting from surprise to a guarded neutrality. "About what?" "The engagement." "Yes," she replied, summoning all her courage. "This engagement is over. I won't pretend to be engaged to Jake any longer." Richard sat up, his demeanor suddenly serious. "You think you can just walk away from this? This is not a game, Emily. You're throwing away an opportunity for stability and respect." Emily felt the familiar anger bubbling up inside her. "Respect? You think forcing me into a relationship with someone I don't love is respectful? This is about control, not care. You don't get to decide what my life looks like, Dad." Jake stepped forward, sensing the need for support. "Mr. Collins, with all due respect, I don't think this is healthy for either of you. Emily deserves to make her own choices, not be subjected to your expectations." Richard's gaze shifted to Jake, his eyes narrowing in assessment. "And you think you're the one to teach her that lesson? You're a gardener, for heaven's sake. You know nothing of the world she lives in." "Maybe not," Jake said calmly. "But I do know that love isn't built on manipulation or coercion. Emily deserves better than that, and so do you." Richard leaned forward, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "You think you can just come in here and challenge me? I'm her father, and I have the right to guide her future. You're merely an employee in my estate, and I don't need your input." Emily felt the heat rise in her cheeks. "Dad, I'm not a child anymore. I understand that you want what's best for me, but this isn't it. You're suffocating me, and I refuse to live under your thumb any longer." Richard's expression hardened. "And what do you propose instead? That you go running back to that boy, the one who has no future and no ambition? That's not how life works, Emily. That boy is my choice." Emily shot back, her voice unwavering. "You can't dictate who I love or how I live my life. I want the freedom to choose for myself, even if it's a mistake. It's my mistake to make." Richard rose from his chair, the atmosphere thick with tension. "You think you can just choose recklessly, and everything will be fine. The world doesn't work like that. Your choices have consequences, and you'll face them whether you like it or not." "Then let me face them," Emily replied, her heart racing. "I would rather face the consequences of my own decisions than live a lie that you've constructed for me." Richard's eyes flickered with anger. "You're being foolish. This is not just about you. It's about the reputation of this family. I will not let you tarnish it with your reckless behavior." "Reputation? Is that what matters to you?" Emily challenged, her voice rising. "You're more concerned with how the world sees us than with how I feel. I won't be a pawn in your game any longer." Richard took a step closer, his expression fierce. "You don't understand the stakes here, Emily. This engagement was meant to teach you a lesson about the realities of life. You need to learn what it means to face the consequences of your actions." Emily shook her head, tears threatening to spill over. "I understand more than you think. You've tried to control every aspect of my life, since Mom passed away, and it's suffocating me. I need to find my own way, even if it's messy. I deserve that right." "Do you think it will be easy?" Richard asked, his tone softening slightly. "The world out there is harsh, and I've done my best to protect you. I appreciate that, but you're not protecting me. You're isolating me, Emily countered. "I need to make mistakes. I need to live my life. If that means disappointing you, then so be it." The room fell silent, the air thick with unspoken words. Richard looked at his daughter, and for a moment, Emily could see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. She had always been his little girl, the light of his life, and now she was standing before him, ready to break free. "Emily," Richard began, his voice softer now. "You don't know what you're asking for." "I do know," she insisted. "I know I want to be free to make my own choices. I want to love who I choose, not who you think is best for me." Richard ran a hand through his hair, his frustration evident. "And what if you fail? What if this boy turns out to be a mistake?" "Then I'll learn from it," she replied firmly. "That's how life works. We make choices, and sometimes we make mistakes, but at least they're mine to make." Richard stared at her, a myriad of emotions whirling in his expression: anger, sadness, and something akin to fear. "You think this will be easy? The world is unforgiving. You'll face challenges, and I won't always be there to protect you." "I know," Emily said quietly, "but I'd rather face the world on my own terms than hide behind your walls of control. It's time for me to live my own life." Richard took a step back, his expression shifting to one of resignation. "So, you're really going to walk away from everything? From your family? From this life?" "Not everything. I'm still your daughter, but I'm choosing to define my own life," she replied, her voice steady. Silence enveloped the room as Richard considered her words. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "If you do this, you'll be making a choice that could change everything. I can't stop you, but I will not be a part of it." Emily felt a mix of relief and trepidation wash over her. "I understand. I just hope one day you'll understand why I had to do this." Richard looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You think this is easy for me, letting go. But you have to know I'm doing this because I love you, even if it doesn't feel like it right now." Emily nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I love you too, Dad, but I need to find my own path." As she turned to leave the study, Jake stepped forward, offering her a reassuring smile. "You did it, Emily. You stood your ground." "I can't believe it's finally over," she said, a mixture of relief and lingering anxiety flooding her system. "Now what?" "Now we face whatever comes next, together," Jake replied, his voice steady. With newfound determination, they walked out of the study, leaving the remnants of Richard's control behind. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting the estate in shades of twilight. As they stepped outside, Emily felt a sense of liberation that she had longed for. But freedom came with uncertainty. The road ahead was fraught with challenges, and she couldn't shake the feeling that her father wouldn't let her go without a fight. The realization weighed on her, but she pushed it aside. For the first time, she was ready to face the world on her own terms. As they walked through the gardens, surrounded by the sweet scent of blooming flowers, Emily felt the weight of the past begin to lift. She had taken a significant step toward reclaiming her life, and though she knew the journey ahead would be difficult, she also knew that she would not be alone. Together, she and Jake would navigate the uncharted waters of their new reality. "Let's start fresh," Emily said, glancing at Jake, a smile breaking through her uncertainty. "No more games. Just us, figuring it out as we go." "Just us," Jake echoed, a grin spreading across his face. "No more pretending. Let's see what the future holds." With each step they took, Emily felt the heaviness in her heart begin to lift. The fight was far from over, but she was ready to face it head-on. She would find her own way, and in doing so, she would learn what it meant to truly live. As they walked away from the shadows of her father's control, the first glimmers of hope illuminated their path, signaling the dawn of a new beginning. The unraveling. The next few weeks felt like a whirlwind for Emily and Jake as they navigated the aftermath of her confrontation with Richard. The freedom she had fought for brought a mixture of exhilaration and trepidation, but one thing was clear: She was determined to carve her own path, even if it meant facing her father's wrath. After the emotional showdown, Richard had withdrawn, his demeanor becoming more reserved and cold. Emily felt the distance grow between them, a chasm filled with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. The mansion, once filled with the echoes of laughter and warmth, now felt more like a battleground, a place where past grievances lingered in the air, heavy and suffocating. Despite the tension at home, Emily found solace in her budding friendship with Jake. They spent countless hours together, exploring the estate, tending to the gardens, and discussing everything from dreams to fears. Jake's calming presence became a beacon of hope in her turbulent life, and Emily began to see him in a different light, beyond the confines of her father's scheme. One evening, as they worked in the vegetable patch, Emily wiped the sweat from her brow, her heart racing with newfound determination. "I can't believe how freeing it feels to make my own choices," she said, planting seeds in the rich soil. "For the first time, I feel like I can breathe." Jake smiled, glancing up from his work. "I'm glad to hear that. It takes courage to stand up to your father. Not many would dare to challenge him." "Courage is one thing, but I'm also terrified," she admitted, pulling her hair back into a loose ponytail. "I have no idea what will happen next. What if he tries to ruin my life?" Jake paused, considering her words. "You can't let fear dictate your choices. This is your chance to take control. Whatever he does, you have the strength to face it. We'll face it together." Emily felt a surge of gratitude for Jake's unwavering support. She had grown to rely on him in ways she never expected. Their bond deepened as they shared their hopes and fears, and Emily began to imagine a life beyond her father's influence, a life filled with possibilities. But the peace was short-lived. One afternoon, as Emily was preparing for a small gathering with friends of the estate, Richard stormed into the garden, his face a mask of fury. "Emily, we need to talk," he barked, his voice echoing through the flower beds. Jake instinctively stepped closer to Emily, ready to defend her if needed. "What's going on, Mr. Collins?" he asked, his tone steady. Richard ignored Jake, focusing solely on Emily. "You can't keep avoiding me. This charade has gone on long enough. You need to end this nonsense with Jake." Emily's heart raced, but she stood her ground. "I'm not avoiding you, Dad. I'm living my life, and I won't let you control me anymore." "You think this is living?" Richard seethed. "You're throwing away everything I've worked for. You're embarrassing this family. It's not about you or your reputation. It's about my life." Emily shot back, her voice rising with defiance. "I refuse to be a puppet in your game anymore." "Then what? You'll run off with a gardener. Is that what you want? A life of mediocrity?" Richard spat, his anger palpable. "You have no idea what you're throwing away." "Stop it," Emily yelled, her frustration boiling over. "You don't get to dictate my worth or my future. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm claiming my life back." Richard took a step closer, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. "You're making a grave mistake, Emily. I won't stand by and let you ruin everything." Jake interjected, stepping forward protectively. "Mr. Collins, with all due respect, Emily deserves the right to choose her own path. You can't force her to conform to your expectations." Richard's gaze flicked to Jake, a flash of anger igniting in his eyes. "You have no place in this conversation. You're just a gardener, an employee in my household. Stay out of my family affairs." "Maybe I'm just a gardener, but that doesn't mean I don't care about Emily," Jake replied, his voice unwavering. "She deserves to be happy, and I won't let you bully her into submission." Richard's eyes darkened as he turned back to Emily. "You're making a fool of yourself. You think this boy cares about you. This is a mistake you'll regret for the rest of your life." Emily felt her heart pounding in her chest, but she refused to back down. "No, Dad. This is my choice, and I'm not going to live in fear of your anger anymore. You've controlled my life for too long." The confrontation escalated, voices rising as they faced off. Jake felt the tension between them grow, the air crackling with unspoken conflict. Emily stood tall, refusing to let her father's words cut her down. She knew the battle wasn't just against Richard. It was against the years of conditioning that had taught her to obey without question. "Enough," Richard finally shouted, his voice echoing through the garden. "You have no idea what you're doing, and I will not allow you to destroy this family's name." With that, he stormed away, leaving Emily shaken but resolute. She had stood her ground, but the price of her defiance weighed heavily on her. "What now?" Jake asked, watching her carefully. That was intense. "I don't know," Emily admitted, her heart racing. "I feel like I've unleashed something I can't contain. What if he retaliates? What if he tries to ruin my life?" Jake stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You can't let fear hold you back. You've done the hardest part by standing up to him. Now, we just need to stay strong." Over the following days, Richard's anger manifested in subtle ways. He began to tighten his grip on the estate, implementing stricter rules and increasing scrutiny over Emily's movements. Every interaction felt charged with tension, and Emily could feel Richard's disapproval lurking behind every corner. The small gathering she had planned with friends turned into an uncomfortable affair. Richard's presence loomed large, a silent reminder of the conflict brewing between them. Emily's friends were eager to celebrate, but the underlying tension made it difficult for her to enjoy the evening. As the night wore on, Emily found herself stepping outside for a breath of fresh air, seeking solace beneath the stars. The cool night air was a welcome relief, but she couldn't shake the feeling of unease. "Hey," a familiar voice broke the silence. Jake appeared beside her, his presence calming her racing heart. "You okay?" Emily leaned against the railing, staring up at the stars. "I don't know, Jake. I feel like I'm in a constant battle with my dad. No matter what I do, it's never enough for him." Jake crossed his arms, watching her thoughtfully. "You're fighting for your freedom, Emily. It's not going to be easy, but it's worth it. You've already shown so much courage. I just wish things could be simpler." She sighed, feeling the weight of her choices pressing down on her. "I didn't want it to come to this. I thought I could reason with him, but he just won't listen." "Sometimes the people we care about the most are the hardest to reach," Jake said gently. "You're taking a stand, and that's powerful. You're showing him that you're not afraid to fight for what you want." Emily smiled faintly, grateful for his support. "You make it sound so easy, but I feel like I'm losing everything. My father's trust, my sense of security. What if this doesn't end well?" "Whatever happens, you're not alone," Jake reassured her, stepping closer. "We'll figure this out together. You're stronger than you know." Just then, Richard stepped out onto the patio, his expression darkening at the sight of them together. "Emily, I need to speak with you," he said curtly, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Can it wait?" Emily replied, her heart racing. "I'm with Jake." "This is not a discussion," Richard snapped, his frustration evident. "Now." Emily exchanged a glance with Jake, uncertainty swirling within her. "Fine," she relented, her heart pounding. "But I'm not backing down." As she followed Richard inside, Jake remained on the patio, watching the door close behind them. He could feel the tension rising, a storm brewing within the walls of the Collins estate. Richard led Emily into the formal sitting room, the air thick with unspoken animosity. "You've embarrassed me enough," he said, his voice low and controlled. "This charade needs to end. You will not see Jake again, and you will resume your engagements with respectable suitors." Emily felt her anger flare, her hands clenching into fists. "No, Dad, I won't be forced into another engagement. I refuse to live my life according to your plans. You're making a mockery of this family," Richard shouted, his voice echoing through the opulent room. "I built this legacy, and you're throwing it away for some fleeting romance." "It's not fleeting. It's my life," Emily fired back, her emotions boiling over. "You don't get to dictate who I can love or how I can live. I deserve the right to choose for myself." Richard glared at her, the lines on his face deepening with frustration. "You're a foolish child, thinking you can throw everything away for a gardener. You're better than that. Maybe I want to be with someone who sees me for who I am, not just for my family name," Emily shouted, the words spilling out before she could rein them in. "You've never cared about what I want, only what you want." Richard's expression darkened, a storm brewing behind his eyes. "You will regret this, Emily. You're making a mistake that will haunt you for the rest of your life." "Maybe I'd rather live with my mistakes than under your control," she replied defiantly. "I'm done letting you dictate my worth." As the confrontation escalated, the walls of the estate felt as if they were closing in around her. Emily stood firm, determined to break free from the chains of her father's expectations. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, she felt empowered. Richard stormed out of the room, leaving Emily standing there, heart racing with a mixture of adrenaline and defiance. She had spoken her truth, but the weight of her father's anger lingered in the air. As she returned to the patio, Jake was waiting for her, concern etched on his face. "How did it go?" he asked softly. "It was intense," Emily admitted, her voice shaky. "But I stood my ground. I won't let him control me anymore." "Good for you," Jake said, admiration shining in his eyes. "You're stronger than you think, Emily. This isn't easy, but you're fighting for yourself, and that's what matters." Emily took a deep breath, feeling the sense of clarity amidst the chaos. "I know it's going to get worse before it gets better, but I'm ready to face whatever comes next." Jake nodded, his expression earnest. "Whatever happens, I'm here for you. We'll get through this together." With each passing day, Emily felt her confidence grow, even in the face of her father's wrath. She was ready to fight for her freedom, ready to embrace the unknown with open arms. As the shadows of the Collins estate loomed around her, she was determined to emerge stronger, no matter the cost. The battle was just beginning, but Emily was no longer afraid. She was ready to reclaim her life, her choices, and her future, and with Jake by her side, she felt empowered to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. The reckoning. The days turned into weeks, and the tension between Emily and Richard escalated into a near-constant state of conflict. Every encounter was fraught with animosity, as Richard's attempts to regain control clashed head-on with Emily's newfound determination to live life on her own terms. The estate, once a sanctuary of warmth and laughter, had transformed into a battlefield, each room echoing with the remnants of their arguments. Emily had grown accustomed to the uncertainty that now marked her days. She would wake up each morning, resolve coursing through her veins, ready to face whatever new confrontation awaited her. She found solace in the small moments with Jake, their friendship blossoming into a support system that felt as solid as the ancient oaks lining the estate's grounds. One crisp morning, as the sun bathed the vineyards in a golden hue, Emily found herself wandering through the gardens, lost in thought. Jake was busy tending to the flowers, humming a soft tune that seemed to blend with the rustling leaves. She watched him for a moment, appreciating how effortlessly he worked, his hands skillfully coaxing life from the earth. "Hey, do you ever think about what you want in the future?" Emily asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Jake looked up, brushing dirt from his hands. "Sometimes, but honestly, I'm just focused on getting through each day. What about you?" "I've been thinking about it a lot lately," Emily admitted, her brow furrowing. "I know I want to be free to make my own choices, but I also want to do something meaningful. I want to help people, to make a difference." Jake nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That sounds great, Emily. You have the drive and passion to do that. It's just going to take some time to figure out how. I guess I just don't want to disappoint my dad. I know he cares about me, but he sees everything through this lens of control. It's suffocating," she replied, a hint of sadness creeping into her voice. "Disappointing him doesn't mean you're doing the wrong thing," Jake reassured her. "You have to live for yourself, not him. It's your life, and you deserve to make your own choices." Just then, Emily's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and glanced at the screen, her heart sinking as she read the message from her father. "Richard Collins, we need to talk. Now." Jake noticed her expression change and stepped closer. "What is it?" "It's my dad. He wants to talk," she said, dread pooling in her stomach. "I have a feeling it's not going to be good." "Do you want me to come with you?" Jake asked, concern etched on his face. Emily hesitated, weighing her options. "No, this is something I need to face alone. But I'll call you afterward. I promise." With a resolute nod, she headed toward the main house, her heart pounding with each step. As she approached Richard's study, the memories of their previous confrontations played in her mind, a montage of anger and frustration that had defined their relationship for too long. Taking a deep breath, she knocked on the door, the sound echoing in the otherwise silent hallway. "Dad, it's me." "Come in," Richard's voice called from the other side, a mixture of authority and weariness that sent a chill down her spine. Emily stepped inside, her posture straightening as she prepared for another battle. Richard sat behind his desk, the flickering light from the fireplace casting shadows on his face. He looked weary, but there was a storm brewing in his eyes that made her uneasy. "Sit down, Emily," he commanded, gesturing to the chair opposite him. She obeyed, her heart racing as she sensed the gravity of the situation. "What did you want to talk about?" Richard leaned forward, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "I've been thinking about everything that's happened lately. Your behavior, your refusal to listen. It's unacceptable." Emily felt a rush of indignation. "My behavior? I'm simply standing up for myself, Dad. I won't be controlled anymore." "Control is not the issue here," Richard replied, his voice steady. "It's about responsibility and understanding your place in this world. You're not just representing yourself, you're representing our family. And your actions have consequences." "Consequences?" she scoffed, crossing her arms defiantly. "You mean the consequences of living my life on my own terms. You can't keep using that excuse to manipulate me." Richard's eyes narrowed. "This isn't manipulation. It's guidance. You're too young to understand the full weight of your choices. I've worked hard to build our family's reputation, and I won't let you throw it away." Emily felt her anger boil beneath the surface. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm trying to find my own way, and you're the one making it impossible." "Finding your way doesn't mean abandoning everything I've built," Richard retorted. "You're making a grave mistake, Emily, and I won't stand by and watch you ruin your future." "What future?" she shouted, frustration spilling over. "The one you've dictated for me. I don't want that future. I want a life filled with my own choices, my own love. Why can't you see that?" Richard stood up abruptly, his expression fierce. "You think you can just walk away from this family? From the responsibilities that come with it? You're going to regret this, Emily. I can promise you that." Emily stood up as well, refusing to back down. "You're right. I'm walking away from the idea that I have to be someone I'm not just to please you. I want to be true to myself, even if it means disappointing you." Richard's jaw clenched, and Emily could see the battle of emotions waging within him. "This is not how I raised you. You were always meant to inherit this estate, to take on the family legacy. I won't allow you to tarnish it." "Maybe I don't want to inherit it," she shot back, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Maybe I want to create my own legacy, one that isn't defined by your expectations." "Then you're choosing a path that will lead to nothing but regret," he said coldly, his voice low and dangerous. "You think love and passion are enough to build a life. They aren't. Security, stability, those are what matter." "Maybe that's your truth, but it's not mine," Emily replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her heart. "I'd rather risk everything for a chance at happiness than live a life of quiet desperation under your thumb." Richard's eyes flashed with anger, and Emily felt a chill run down her spine. "You're making a mistake you'll never be able to take back. I will not support your decisions, and you will face the consequences of your actions." With that, Richard stormed out of the study, leaving Emily standing there, heart racing and mind swirling. She had stood her ground, but the weight of his threats loomed over her like a dark cloud. Feeling a mix of anger and determination, she turned on her heel and walked out of the room. She needed to find Jake. She needed to talk to someone who understood. As she stepped outside, the cool air hit her like a rush of clarity. The gardens were quiet, the only sound the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. Spotting Jake working near the vegetable patch, she hurried over, her heart racing. "Emily, are you okay?" he asked, concern etched on his face as he saw the distress in her eyes. "I just had the worst confrontation with my dad," she said, her voice trembling. "He's furious, and I'm scared of what he might do next." Jake stepped closer, his gaze steady. "What did he say?" "He threatened me. He said I would regret my choices and that he wouldn't support me," Emily replied, feeling the weight of her father's words settle heavily on her heart. "He's more determined than ever to control my life." Jake's expression hardened. "You can't let him intimidate you. You fought hard to stand up for yourself, and you can't give in now." "I know," she said, wiping away the tears that threatened to spill over. "But what if he tries to ruin everything? He has the power to make my life miserable." "Then we'll fight back," Jake said firmly, determination burning in his eyes. "You're not alone in this. We'll figure it out together." Emily took a deep breath, feeling a flicker of hope ignite within her. "I want to believe that. I just don't know what he's capable of. Whatever happens, we'll handle it." "I'm with you, Emily," Jake reassured her, his presence grounding her. "You've got the strength to face him, and I'll be right by your side." The bond between them felt more profound than ever, and Emily realized that she wasn't just fighting for her freedom. She was fighting for a future she could build with someone who believed in her. As they stood together in the fading light, she knew the battle wasn't over. Richard would retaliate, but this time, Emily felt ready to face whatever storm came their way. She was determined to reclaim her life, her choices, and her dreams. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the vineyards. Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose fill her heart. She would not back down. She would fight for the life she desired. With Jake by her side, she felt empowered to take on the challenges ahead. In that moment, surrounded by the beauty of the gardens and the promise of a new beginning, Emily took a step forward into her future, ready to confront the reckoning that awaited her.